Welcome to the Idea Climbing Podcast. People love to hear and listen intently to great stories. If you can craft them for your marketing initiatives, you'll stand out from the crowd and your competition. I discuss how to do that in this episode with my guest, Thom Van Dycke. Thom is a business advisor for solopreneurs and small agencies and a certified StoryBrand guide. He works to help his clients develop strategic offers that deliver huge value to their customers. In this episode, we dive into topics such as how to get to the point quicker in your marketing strategies, two common storytelling mistakes most people make and how to avoid them, the one thing that, when it comes to storytelling and marketing, you need to do above all else, and other golden nuggets of advice. You're going to love this show. Thank you, Thom, for making time to do the Idea Climbing Podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Mark, thank you for having me on.
And we're going to be talking about how to use storytelling to stand out from the crowd. But before we get into strategy, tactics, tips, I would love to know, how did you get into it to the point where you're helping clients do that? What's your story with storytelling?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story. I think it's interesting. I was a pastor for 19 years. And so when you're in that kind of a role, there's a lot of storytelling already. And in 2020, I left ministry after 19 years and started my own business. And actually, I had read this book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. In the back of the book, it talked about certifying as a story brand guide. And I thought, I wonder if it's time for a switch. And so I launched my business. I started out as a copywriter, and I just fell in love with taking this new genre of communication, marketing, and figuring out a way to apply story to it. So last 4 years, that's largely what I've been doing. Now I do more consulting work, but it comes up a lot. So it's extremely powerful. The story brand framework, very, very powerful for organizing your thoughts around story.
So when it comes to storytelling and marketing, where do you begin? How do you get your clients started? What would you suggest people listening and watching do? Where does the whole storytelling phenomenon, if you will, begin in the world of marketing?
Well, it's interesting because it's not, people think that it's about telling their story, like being biographical. And there is something important about that in marketing. I really believe that because especially when you're, in a very personal sort of setting, like where you're working one-on-one with clients, like coaches and that kind of thing, there it's good to be biographical in your marketing, but that's not totally what it means to use story in marketing. Story and marketing really looks at what are the parts of a story and how do we use them in our marketing. So every story has 7 parts. You have a hero who wants something, can't get it, they have a problem. That makes them feel a certain way internally. So now they have an internal problem. Then they meet a guide. The guide gives them a plan, paints a picture of success or failure, and calls them to action. And the whole arc of the story is one of transformation. So the idea is story, that framework, the reason it's so powerful is that our brains are wired to recognize the patterns of stories. So if you look out through all of human history, basically as far back as we have recorded communication, humankind has used stories to try and make sense of their world. So obviously, the more ancient you go, the more the stories are supernatural in nature and that kind of thing. But come up to today in modern times, a scientific era, we're still creating stories to try and explain the universe to, we have things like Our Planet, documentaries, all of these things. And so we are still using story to make sense of the universe, even though it's in a scientific, naturalistic way. And that is it's sort of like it's a part of our DNA to make sense of the world that way, and we recognize it. So when I start with a client, I make sure they understand that. I help them understand that marketing, in order to be effective, needs to be extremely clear because the brain wants to find the shortest path to meaning possible. So when we put our marketing and messaging into a story format, we're helping the brain get to the point faster, and it helps us land more deals, close more sales, because it just cuts out kind of some of the excessive brain activity that you need to use.
So how do you get to the point quicker? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, here's some really simple things. Um, in storytelling, there's a you can only have one hero. So, so one of the simplest things you can do is to look at your messaging, your website, your marketing collateral, your social media, and say, am I positioning myself as the hero or my client as the hero, the customer? Because everybody wakes up as the center of their own universe. We do, but also our clients do.
Yeah.
And if we can get them to understand, like if we can meet them on their terms as the hero of their story, we're going to have a much better chance of actually getting them to engage with us. In a movie, when you have more than one hero, you end up with confusing plot lines, like the Marvel universe. I love the Marvel movies, but once they converge into the Avengers, all of a sudden you have a very, very complicated and confusing plot line. Too many heroes. There's far too many heroes. So in our marketing, we should have a singular narrative where our customer is the hero and we play the guide to their problem. That's one of the fastest way you can do it. So you read and you go, like on my website, do I talk about myself and our company more than I talk about our client and their problems? Always talk more about your client, their customer, and their problems, and you'll be naturally positioning them as the hero as opposed to yourself.
That's so different than what I initially would think, as far as, oh, it's the hero, it's me, and I'm, rah rah, I'm so great at everything. Could you unpack that a little bit more? What is it? What do you, when you say make the client the hero, how do you make the client the hero?
Sure. So the least effective marketing we can do is to say something like, hey, I'm awesome, buy my product and you'll be awesome like me. So there are certain brands in the world that can afford to do that. The big, big brands like, the PepsiCos and the Coca-Colas and Nike. But what's fascinating is even they don't do that. So you take a sports brand like a Nike or an Adidas or something like that. What do? They find a spokesperson in sports. So they look at, this Olympian or this basketball player or this hockey player, and they don't say, we're awesome, buy our product and you'll be awesome. They say, look, here's one of your heroes in sports. He uses our shoes. You could be just like him if you were that. So they're still projecting the hero away from the brand and making it about the other people. Um, a really simple way to do that is, instead of going straight into your solutions, talk about people's problems. As soon as we stop talking about people's problems, they stop listening to us anyways. And it's very, very compassionate to articulate the hero's problems. It's very compassionate to articulate our customers' problems, because it means that we understand them. It means that there's common ground. They lean in when we do that. So if you're positioning your brand as the hero, you're going to be like, oh, we've got this solution and this solution, and we can do this for you and we can do that for you. Instead, why don't you say, let's take a concrete example. Let's take a veterinarian.
Okay.
Don't you? Isn't it? Uh, doesn't it just mess with your emotions when you see the animal you love suffering?
Mm.
So instead of saying, come to us, we know how to cure your pet, we know how to help you have a healthy pet, we say, doesn't it hurt your heart as a pet owner when you see your dog suffering,
Mm.
right? It's totally different perspective. And people go, yeah, but isn't that negative marketing? No, it's not. It's compassionate. It's saying, I understand how you're feeling, and now let's talk about how I can guide you towards a solution.
Okay, that's a perfect segue. You make the client the hero, the potential client, whatever it might be. Then you identify a problem that gets solved. Where does this, what does the rest of the story look like? Because I mean, it sounds like that could happen pretty quickly. What is the rest of the
Yeah.
story after you've established a hero and a problem?
Yeah. Well, then you set yourself up as the guide. So in a story, the guide is the most powerful character. The hero is not the character. You don't even want to play the hero. The hero wants something, they can't get it, they're weak, they don't have the answers. Yoda is more powerful than Luke,
Yeah.
like far more powerful, right? Dumbledore, clearly more powerful than Harry Potter. So, the guide is the one who has the solution. So this is how you position yourself as the guide in your marketing. You say, we understand. We think it's just wrong that you should have to watch while your animals suffer. We think it's just wrong that you should have to have a broken relationship with your kids. We think it's just wrong that you don't know how to cook a decent meal. So that's empathy. Then we come in as the authority, because a guide has two things. They have empathy and they have authority. The authority piece now is, look, we're a collective of parents who've raised kids already. So we know what it's like to have a 13-year-old, right? Or we've got together a group of the most successful chefs around to put together this home cooking meal for you so that you can cook like us, right? So
Yeah.
you position yourself with empathy and authority, and you need both, because if you have all empathy but you don't know what you're doing, that's going to fall pretty flat. On the other hand, there's lots of people who are very authoritative and know what they're doing, but they have no empathy, so nobody wants to work with them. So even in your website, a website's a nice example because it's very linear. We read in a linear way.
Mhm.
You start with a summary of what you do, because we know that very many people bounce after 3.5 seconds. They're off your website. So that first hero section needs to be very clear. Right under that, we start talking about people's problems. Under that, we start talking about how we can help them get to a solution. So it's like summary, problem,
Mhm.
and then guide. How do I position myself as the guide to help you get to the solution that you require?
So how does the story close, or is the guide the closing of the story? Is there more to it after you
Yeah.
establish a guide?
Oh yeah, because how many stories you'll see this in movies. The guide and the hero are together, and the guide has been training the hero, and then the hero's like, I just don't want to do it, or I'm scared, or I don't want to take that risk. And so what does the guide do? They say, look, I understand you're scared, but you are the only person who can do this thing. You are the only person who can save the princess. You are the only person who can rescue whoever, right?
Mhm.
So they call them to action. So every story needs a call to action. And at the call to action point, there's stake. There's something that can be lost and won. And that's very important. We have to paint both the negative and the positive stakes, consequences. If there's no consequence to not doing business with you, Mark, why would
Yeah.
anybody hire you? Right?
Ooh, go on. I love that.
Well, it's true. Like, we solve real problems for real people. So we should be able to tell them, look, I get it. You're struggling to connect with your teenagers. If you don't work on that, it's not going to get better. You're going to get more distant, right? On the other hand, if you learn to work together, if you try these communication exercises, if you adopt one meal, like eating a meal together every week, this is the success you're going to experience, right? So people, again, don't like talking about problems and negative consequences, but I like to explain it like this. Um, People are always trying to gain heaven or avoid hell. That's it. That's marketing. They're trying to gain heaven or avoid hell. I like to break it up in a 30-70 split. 70% of the time, I try to be positive. I talk about the aspirational identity. Look at who you can become. You can become a parent that actually has kids who talk to them, who don't roll their eyes all the time. Well, you'll probably never solve that, but maybe you'll get close, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, you have to talk about the negative consequences as well. There is a lot at stake. We know, again, parenting, we know from research that kids who are connected with their parents and attached in a healthy way have XYZ better chance of, succeeding in relationships in life. So we position the messaging in both ways. We try to focus more on the positive, and less on the negative, but we do have to talk about the negative. And it's an important thing to realize, because people are always, they have a propensity towards negativity or positivity. So all we're really trying to say is, in your marketing, be balanced. You can't always be negative, that would be a downer, but you
Mhm.
can't always be positive either, because that doesn't feel realistic to people. We need to actually meet them in their problems. So all of that happens within marketing, all of that. And it always, the story, there's a turning point at a call to action. Act now. Snip the red wire. Brave the raging river, but act now. Do something, because there's consequences if you don't. In marketing, buy now. Uh, Book a call. Those kinds of calls to action are very powerful. They're not ambiguous at all.
Mhm.
And so we need clear calls to action in our marketing. That kind of closes the story loop a little bit, for our customers, and they're like, okay, now I'm in. Now I'm ready to forge ahead towards that successful picture. So that whole chain of events needs to end with a call to action in order for it to be capped off.
Okay, so someone's listening to this, the process makes beautiful sense, open to
Right.
close. What we haven't touched on too much yet, what should you not do? What are pitfalls to avoid when you're getting into storytelling?
Uh, Being cute. We say storytelling, and people have this idea that we're talking about writing a novel, or we're talking about, Star Wars or poetry. No, that's all garbage. Marketing has to be crystal clear, crystal clear. So, cute and clever never wins. If you confuse, you'll lose. These little pithy sayings that
Yeah.
StoryBrand bandies about. But if you confuse, you'll lose. Cute and clever never wins. There's a place for artistry, but at the end of the day, the clearest message is the one that's going to actually close the deal. If there's any ambiguity, people aren't going to do it. So don't try to be cute and clever. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about story-based marketing. That's not
Mhm.
it. Um, Another one, just the biggest one that we see, is positioning your brand as the hero. Now, I'm gonna just pause there for a minute, because when you are a personal brand, the rules are just a little bit different. Okay,
Mhm.
because I'm a solopreneur and I'm a consultant. If I want people to trust me, they're going to have to know me. So a lot of the marketing that I've done in the past has been very biographical. So what I do is I tell a story, and I love telling stories, um, because AI can never write my story for me. So I'll tell a biographical story. I know that the person who's reading has never heard it before, because it's me. And then I'll attach a sort of a universal truth, and then there's a call to action under it. But it's really different. There's a lot of strategy that goes into what story am I going to tell, where the audience so relates to it that they can see themselves in my story. And that takes a certain amount of skill and well, artistry, honestly.
Yeah.
But that's the only time really where you want to do that. Like, for example, I see plumbing companies. I can think of a company right now, right on the top of their website. My granddaddy started this company back in 1932, and we've been a business run ever since. Nobody gives a rip. You know why? Because their toilet is overflowing and it's the middle of the night and they don't know who to call.
Mm.
The fact that your grandfather started the company in 1932 matters nothing at that point. So, go for the clarity. This is the number you call. This is what you do. So, those would be two big pitfalls: positioning yourself as the hero when you should be positioned as the guide. And
Mhm.
then also, uh, what was the other one I just said? Also, being cute and clever. Don't be cute and clever.
So you mentioned the bio. I'd like to look into that a little bit more. The
Yeah.
biographical story, because that is you, and I think people expect to hear a little bit about that. And then the whole story about the hero's journey and making them the hero, and how do you know what story to tell and when, or are they always combined?
Oh, it's tricky. So I've written hundreds of pages of biography in short story form, and I do literally mean hundreds of pages. And very often, the when you sit down with somebody, you say, "Well, we should tell your story." They go, "But Tom, I've seen how many stories you can tell from your life. I don't even know where to start." That's no problem. Let's just start with, what do you remember from your ninth birthday? Tell me a bit about it. You remember when you got that big gift, or you were on a vacation for your, like, let's start there. And then we have to think through, what was the thing that happened in that story that made it interesting? Oh, well, we got a flat tire and my dad was really stressed about it. And my parents were fighting. I remember that. Everyone in the world can relate to that. So now, how do we apply that to a veterinarian? Well, now we have to think about it. We have to go, where do people feel tension in their lives surrounding their pets? When they bark incessantly, or when something goes wrong,
Hmm.
or, and now that's how you connect it, like that. So really, when you're a personal brand, veterinary is not a great example. It's better with a consultant, but let's say you're a business consultant. You're going to eventually come up with these things that you do with clients, really important lessons, your core pillars, you know your little statements that you say that you feel affectionate towards, or whatever. You write those down on one side, and then you brainstorm stories on the other side, and then you just draw lines, and you're like, yeah, that lesson, you can learn that from that story. Let's do it.
Hmm.
Let's put it together. So that's literally what I do with clients sometimes, is we just brainstorm stories, and we put down their IP and their ideas about what makes good business or life coaching
Hmm.
or whatever it is, and we just connect the dots. And it's a very powerful way to do marketing, because like, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of marketing sucks pretty bad, and
Uh-huh.
it's boring, and I am immediately suspicious that it's just AI driven anyways, because we're so AI saturated right now.
Hmm.
So what am I actually going to say that is so original that somebody else or a dozen other people haven't said it before?
Hmm.
Very little. But if I can capture your attention with a story about my life that nobody else has, right? And so it makes it very unique. I say this a lot. This is one of my things that I say a lot. On the surface, if you write down what I do and put it into Google, my services, list them, put it into Google, you will find dozens, if not hundreds, of people who do exactly what I do on
Hmm.
paper. Same for you, Mark.
Yep.
You write down your services, you put it into Google. We are in saturated workspaces. Now, what's interesting is, nobody will ever hire you and nobody will ever hire me without meeting us first.
Hmm.
And that's really important. Why is that so important? Because our USP, our unique selling proposition, is not what we sell, it's us,
Who we are.
who we are. It's my little bit of a unique process, the chemistry that we feel, uh, the way we laugh, the fact that I'm a bit of a goofball, or I'm very serious, and that you relate to that. Whatever it is, our clients, if your client needs to meet you, then a biographical marketing campaign can help them get to that point where they go, yeah, I actually really like it. It would almost be interesting just to meet this person.
Hmm.
Um, so it works on many levels. Story really does work on many levels. You've got the framework, which is a pattern that we understand. We have the biography that personal brands need to lean into, because we want our audience to know us. Um, we have this fact that we are our own unique selling proposition. It all combines for a much more effective and successful marketing campaign.
That is, I love how it all ties together. And we've covered so much ground in such a short period of time with everything we spoke about, whether it's reiterating something you said, maybe it's touching on something you haven't said. If you were to say, when it comes to storytelling for marketing, if nothing else, do this one thing, at least do this, what would you tell people to do?
Okay, if you do nothing else,
to get started? Above all, what's the most important tip?
Get Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, the book.
Excellent.
Just get it. It's a resource. You will not be disappointed. I wish I could give you one pithy little thing that will, I mean, there's lots of things you can do, but get your head wrapped around the hero's journey, this framework. Because once you understand it, everything else becomes easier.
Okay.
Everything else.
Thank you for the time. If people want to find you online, where's the best place or places to go, Thom?
LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me, and I would love to meet you. And if you want to reach out and DM, just let me know that this is where you heard about me, so that I can shout back to Mark and say, hey, thanks for having me on. I actually got to meet some of your incredible listeners. But just make sure that if you're looking for me, you spell my name right, because I got a weird first spelling and a weird last spelling. So yeah. So ThomVanDycke. Van Dyke is Dycke. So I hope we do connect on LinkedIn, though.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time, Thom.
Absolutely, Mark. Thanks for having me.
And scene.